life. And today we are very happy to say that after the government asked us to change our name to broaden the sort of ambit of our responsibility from an Ecotourism Society of India to now what is called the Responsible Tourism Society of India, we find we might be at the tipping point, because given what has happened to the planet, given what you've just heard in terms of COVID, and we've all had our little inner journeys, I'm sure, in how we want to be as a human being on this planet, whether we are with small business, big business, and indeed, what are our impacts. So we think that tourism is a powerful force for good, but if it is done the right way. And it's the same story. If it is done the wrong way, it can wreak havoc, as we have seen with certain rather sad examples of, mass tourism and so on. So we thought that we would, as I said earlier, that it's a kind of a pizza of offering, that we want to bring to ourselves, to the industry, to many people who are enthused about tourism and doing it right in India. And this slice was mainly looking at certain operational issues that impact the well-being of not only the animals and the forests and so on, and the communities, but also of the tourism experience. So what is it that we can do? What is it that we can look at some of the national parks around which have some good practices? And indeed, at the same time, there are some, I would say, bizarrely bureaucratic procedures that we need to unshackle ourselves. So to that extent, let me start by first inviting very quickly our two guests who are from our partner organizations where we are intending to sign a memorandum of understanding. And the first one is Vivek Saxena, who is a forest officer from the Haryana Cadre himself, and he heads the IUCN in India. And that is the World Conservation Union, and as most of you know, and it's a repository of some amazing knowledge and some amazing groundwork that they do. I've already been lucky to engage at 2 of their webinars, and what they are doing very sensibly is taking every different landscape and bringing a focus on it. So we've, I know I engaged one with ecotourism, there was another one on mountains, there's something on deserts, and they've already done something on oceans and beaches and so on. So they're going in a very systematic manner, and it'll be a true delight, Vivek, to have you as one of our key partners, because RTSOI right now is in the mode of creating a lot of alliances with like-minded people. And one of them is also the United Nations Environment Program, which we are quite excited about, because through this knowledge, we want to disseminate it to our fellow colleagues at the industry. So over to you, Vivek, for your short message to tell us what you're doing at the IUCN and how we hope that this partnership can go strong and forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandip. And
just a minute, Mr. Saxena. If may I request all panelists to mute themselves, because there's a lot of background noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandip, and good morning to everyone. So IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. Let me give a little bit background, a very brief one, that as you already know, it was set up in 1948, one of the oldest organization and largest conservation network globally. More than 1,100 institutional members that include the governments and the civil society organizations, and more than 15,000 commission members across the 6 IUCN commissions. So it's a unique in the sense that in other conventions, the national governments are the members. Here, the governments are also members, civil society organizations are also members, and institutions are also members. So it blends, or you can say brings about the expertise or interaction at various levels. And the main mission of the IUCN is to influence, encourage, and assist society. India is also Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is a member of IUCN. And we have in India, we have more than 40 institutional members and more than 800 commission members. A strong network. So IUCN in the recent past taking opportunity of the COVID time, because in normal times it was quite difficult to bring all the people together at the same time physically. But we could organize one IUCN members forum meeting also in April, where all the members participated, and there is a plan that how to strengthen this network. Ministry, Environment, Forest, Climate Change also showed quite keen interest that this network organization, the expertise of different people that should be taken advantage of. And IUCN is also having observer status with the United Nations General Assembly. And the reason behind this, that other governments, when they speak in the United Nations, they speak of in respect of interest of the within their geographic boundary. The voice of the environment, which is common to all nations and does not have the geographic boundary, but they need to have, you can say, one agency which need to share the common interest of all the nations. So with these words, I hope that IUCN will be able to partner with the Responsible Tourism Organization of Ecotourism Society of India, which Mandip, earlier it was Ecotourism Society of India. Now the word responsible itself indicates that during the post-COVID times, though word has been added responsible, but we need to be now more and more responsible. And at the same time, when we talk of the tourism in national parks and the sanctuary, the number of other issues which will be deliberated during the today's webinar. But one thing is in the new normals, then how the tourists will go, what sort of norms to be there, the carrying capacity, so that we don't put extra pressure while we go to national parks and sanctuaries. So these will be the key issues. And for this, IUCN is also organizing right now 6-episode webinar series. And the 4 already we have done. The first one was the general one, that post-COVID, what type of new challenges are there to sustain the tourism, because tourism generates more than 4 crore livelihoods. And now with the COVID thing, suddenly everything coming to the standstill. So you can imagine the linkages of these livelihood, the various linkages between the tour operators, the movement and all. So that has come to a standstill. But if we have to move further within these constraints, how to redesign or how to reorient our strategy to ensure sustainable livelihood and also sustainable tourism. These are the new challenges, and that has to be, so we organize this series based on the landscape, different type of sectors. One web series, it was the mountain based, one was related to the adventure tourism, one was related to the coastal areas. So different type of things, and with these webinar things based on the, we had a very, very good panelists during this webinar, and some good suggestions have come out, and we will be compiling them and presenting for the at appropriate level, so that they can be integrated into the future ecotourism related the governance mechanism or at the policy level. So IUCN will be too much happy to partner with the Responsible Ecotourism Society of India and taking these initiatives further. And if any sort of further partnership is required in terms of conservation related aspects, that when the tourists go have to ensure at the same time, we have to sensitize them that the biodiversity also to be conserved. We have to ensure that too much tourists don't move at the same place at the same time, because sometimes what happens when we see the challenges that opportunity during the holiday rush and all, lot of bookings we take, especially tour operators. At the same time, there is a challenge that within those national parks and the sanctuary, there is an issue of the time. These type of pressures are also built up. So everyone has a very, very important role.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Vivek. That's very well put, and we look forward to all sort of working aspects together, specifically on the ecotourism policy, which is one of our new or forthcoming webinars, because as we all know, the Ministry of Environment and Forests have actually been sitting on a draft policy which is nearly coming to fruition, and a lot of us have been in the response mode and so on, but that we'll take on separately. Now, very quickly to wonderful Dr. S.P. Singh, who heads the sustainability wing in the Amity University. And it's also a great delight. He's a former PCCF, Principal Chief Conservator of Forests, and has been adopted or pulled in by the Amity University to actually head a very interesting department, which also has been given the responsibility of sensitizing, like a refresher course for senior forest officials around the country. And in that, we as the former Ecotourism Society and now RTSOI have been going and giving lectures on the pluses and minuses of ecotourism and tourism and so on. And there's been a great engagement. And obviously, there are still lots of forest officers who feel that, tourism is a bit of a pain in the neck. And there are others who feel that obviously tourism is a very powerful tool and we must use it to the benefit of conservation and community. So SP, over to you, if you can give us a quick message on, and we are hoping to collaborate with you, not only on a long term, but also in a sense, a long term where we create a course, maybe at Amity University on ecotourism, so that the young people might be able to take this diploma course or some such. So over to you, and very quickly we can hear your message before we plunge into our further discussions. Thanks. We can't hear you, SP. So, Santosh? We have a small audio glitch on this. We can't hear you, Santosh. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, Shoba, could we get him back after we fielded Harbhajan Pabla, because we can't get his audio. So maybe you can text him on the side and get him to be tech ready, and I'll invite our next speaker before we break out into our panel discussions, and hopefully we can get SP back to give his message.
Yes, sir.
But,
yes,
yeah?
Mandip, I'm just doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So let me come back to wonderful Harbhajan Pabla, who is somebody for a long while, and honorary member. Then we have Mr. Pabla, and then we have Maharaja Gaj Singh out of Jodhpur. Now, he's been an active forest officer for about 35 years, and he retired as a chief wildlife warden out of Madhya Pradesh. And he has also been an international consultant on forestry and wildlife in various countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, etc. But more importantly, he's written 3 very hard-hitting books. One of them is called Road to Nowhere. The other one is Wardens in Shackles. And his third and recent offering, which is as of, I believe, only a few weeks old, is called Laws at War, as in, the laws are seemingly clashing with each other. So he's always been a great proponent of how we should and can use tourism to the betterment of conservation. And I know he speaks with a lot of passion and, ground sort of experience that he's had. So I thought we'll ask him to set the tone in the next few minutes before we open it out to our wonderful field directors who've come to join us in order to eradicate some of these ground level issues and how we can basically proceed to make tourism much better for, in a kind of a ideal world, which is a win-win scenario. So over to you, Harbhajan. Give us your thoughts on what you've been writing, copiously in your books. And obviously this lockdown has been pretty good for you to churn out some wonderful stuff for us to ruminate on. So over to you.
Mandy, thank you very much. And good morning to all the old and new friends, some known, some unknown. And it's great to be among my old colleagues here. Talking about the subject, it is quite close to my heart, and probably I'm a little infamous for having it too close to my heart. I hope I'm audible. Okay. Now, without taking a lot of time, let me rush through whatever little I want to say. I think we have come quite a long way since the 1980s when I became active in the Forest Service. Probably and a long way to go as well. That was the time when we got very few visitors to our parks. And still we continue to say, even at that time, that tourism is a distraction, it's some kind of encumberment. And our job is core forestry, core conservation, and we have to spend time on this little distraction. At that time, we saw wildlife tourism as some kind of a favor we were doing to the society by letting people in. And the main objective of letting people into parks used to be awareness raising, sensitizing people, educating people about what conservation is, what conservation issues are, etc., etc. And we did not have any idea of the economic power and the power of tourism to conserve nature, forest, and wildlife at that time. So at that time, I must say that we were all passive about conservation. But I think towards the end of the century, by 2003, 4, 5, a lot of foresters realized that tourism can be a very powerful conservation tool. It can be helpful in conserving and doing what we wanted to do. And I think the real change in Madhya Pradesh tourism mindset came when the government ordered that you can retain all your revenues from tourism for park management. Look, that happened somewhere in 1905 or 6, but it consolidated over time. And so after that, we started increasing our tariff rates, and slowly maybe then more awareness came, more people started coming, and it became very significant contribution to our conservation budget. And then we also became aware by that time that societies, people living around the parks were critical to the survival of our parks. And those people are suffering because we have a park next door where they cannot go. They've been using those resources for a very long time, but we have now stopped them. And if conservation is successful, we have more animals, they suffer more. Because then we have more animals they have to contend with, and their crop losses will be more, or the protection against crop losses will cost more. Sometimes they lose livestock, sometimes they lose even children. So conservation and tourism somehow had to be wedded together to make them successful. So over time, I have developed several little phrases about wildlife tourism. I call it as the means and motive for conservation as well. Conservation tourism is the means of conserving nature. At the same time, it is also the motive for conserving. Because if you don't make conservation pay for itself, and the conservation doesn't earn its keep, society is not, Indian especially, the poorer countries are not that rich that they can spend sufficient amounts, sufficient resources on conserving wildlife and forests. So as because the conservation, the tourism can generate resources which can be plowed back into conservation as a very powerful tool for conservation. At the same time, we have very, very big areas which have been conserved primarily because those countries wanted tourism. The countries want, like even the Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite National Park, they were created primarily not for conservation. Conservation came as a byproduct. they were primarily created by those governments because they wanted the peoples of those countries to be able to visit and enjoy those areas. And I think tourism is probably one of the most important innovations of modern man, which has a double advantage. It conserves natural resources, and at the same time, it produces jobs and GDP as well. I don't think there's any other industry, any other vocation, any other activity which has these two very, very big advantages. We can have a development, we can produce resources, we can produce money without destroying nature. Rather, tourism and conservation can only survive if the other survives. If you have tourism, that we are successful in conservation. At the same time, if you do not conserve, if conservation is not successful, you can't have ecotourism, you can't have wildlife tourism. So by and large, to me, conservation and wildlife tourism are essentially the two sides of the same coin. And we must continue to ensure that they continue to be related that way. And we do not see that tourism in any way somehow comes in the way of conserving natural resources. Now, I think a very important part of tourism, a very important property of tourism is that it reduces the pain of conservation. Conservation is a very painful activity for any nation, because you have to snatch those resources from the local people. You have to tell them, no, you can't graze their livestock here, you can't bring the fuel wood from there, you can't make the living the way you've been doing so far. At the same time, then when you have successful conservation, as I said, you have more wild animals to contend with and people have to suffer more. Right? Tourism is the only way through which you can soften that blow by creating jobs and providing employment for the people who are the victims of conservation. So I think if we do not have tourism, because hunting is out of question in our country at the moment, tourism is the only way through which you can make conservation affordable and even desirable to the people of our country. I remember when we set up Panna National Park, I was the first director. Everybody thought the national park was being created to promote tourism. Very few people linked it with our primary desire to protect wildlife. They thought now Gora people will come in that area and we'll have white people moving around in our area. That was probably one of the criticisms we faced, but they didn't link it with wildlife. They thought this place, this is a park, and park means a beautiful place, and we want people from other countries or other cities to come into that area. Now, going on and on, I think we are in a very critical situation now. Wildlife tourism is useful. I think I don't think we need to preach to the converted. Now with the Corona going on, although we were talking about post-COVID tourism, but I don't think we have post-COVID stage anywhere near so as yet. We don't know how long it's going on. I think the contribution in tourism can make both to the revenues of the parks as well as jobs for the communities are going to be much more important than what they have been so far. I'm very sure the conservation budgets are going to go down drastically, and park managers have to cut down on their employment. They may be have to reduce their chowkidars or daily wage staff, or maybe there be probably no money for works. The only money government probably will be able to pay is for salaries. So if they do not generate resources locally, generate revenues locally, I think conservation is going to suffer hugely. At the same time, lots of jobs for the people who have been living around the parks. Probably they were working as migrant laborers in big cities. They have come back now, so they have to find employment somewhere. If we do not somehow employ them gainfully and tourism-related activities with the government or with the service industry, a lot of them might become criminals. They might become poachers, or they start felling and selling trees or whatever. So I think now we are absolutely in a bind now. Even those of my friends who did not embrace tourism as a tool for conservation now, I think they have to look at it very seriously, because I think most states now have gone the way Madhya Pradesh was 10, 20 years ago, that most money generated by parks stays with the parks, if not fully, maybe to a large extent. So that money can become a very important tool for conserving what is so dear to all of us. But the problem, I think, always is what kind of tourism. Although globally tourism has been accepted as a very powerful, very potent tool for conservation and community development, we in India are slightly hesitant, slightly reluctant about embracing tourism. We have been getting government advisories for more than 10, 15 years that tourism should be phased out, tourism should be reduced in protected areas, etc., etc. Those concerns are valid, but I think there are ways of maximizing the benefits from tourism, at the same time minimizing its impact. Rather than concentrating huge numbers of people into small areas, we can spread them thinly, widely. Rather than letting people or asking people to enjoy the entire park only in one way in the form of game drives, we can diversify the activities. The people should be able to enjoy it through several ways. They can walk, they can bike, they can camp, they can sit in watchtowers or hide or whatever. And wherever we have water bodies, I think there are many more options. I think that will, and then there'll be, if we spread our tourism thinly and widely, you don't have to worry about the carrying capacity issues then. You have to worry about carrying capacity, high density, high impact only when you try to confine people into very small areas. So I think we have to now take another look at the way we do tourism in our protected areas. First thing I think we have to do is to consciously embrace tourism as a core mainstream responsibility of the Forest Department. We have to, Forest Department has to be held accountable for ensuring how tourism is doing in these parks, not only in parks, in all our forest areas. This recreation should be one of the principal jobs, objectives of management of forests. And then we must maximize whatever benefits we can generate for the government as well as for the communities. At the same time, must ensure that in no way tourism impacts forest and wildlife adversely. As I said, there are ways of minimizing impacts by dispersing and diversifying tourism. At the same time, there's ways of maximizing revenues by, again, diversifying as well as maximizing numbers. Now, if we open only very small areas, you can accommodate only very small number of people. But if you have large areas and even the density is low, still you can have a large number of people coming and generating whatever benefits we were looking at. So I think I would stop here and wish you all the very best and a wonderful discussion. I look forward to an engaging discussion between the industry leaders as well as my colleagues from the Forest Department. And I hope we end the day with something which we can all be sure that going to help in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Mandy,
Thank you.
yeah, Mr. S.P Singh is there. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. So thanks for that, Dr. Pabla. I think that was brilliant, and I think they were just the important gems that you sort of, set in the crown of wildlife tourism here. And if I had my way, I would actually make your books the prescribed books in schools and colleges, and certainly will promote it at our society and in our travel industry, because much of these are things that we really need to embrace. And not only that, I think we'll also then request the naysayers in the government to really be very actively considered. Because I think you raised a very important point about the poaching and the alternative sources of income that are drying up through tourism, and we can bring that back into discussion later. Let me go back very quickly to Santosh. If your audio is good and running, Santosh, would you like to say something quick and before we move on to the panel, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mandip. I hope I am audible now.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you're audible, sir. If you can move away slightly from the camera, we can see you completely. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So let me about the Amity School of Natural Resources. I'm a firm believer in ecotourism livelihood, and forest conservation. It is a triangle which will work now. We have also a message from our Honorable Prime Minister that we should be Atmanirbhar. If we want to be Atmanirbhar in the management of our forest areas, especially protected areas, we have to believe in ecotourism. And ecotourism, it is a way, responsible tourism. How can you take the people? And whatever Dr. Pabla Saab said, that we have to open more area. Yes, of course. We should protect ourselves to the protected areas, but there are so many other biodiversity areas, different kind of flora and fauna, and each flora and fauna is amazing, amazing, amazing. And therefore, for the point of sustainability, we believe in the sustainability, we require the ecotourism. And ecotourism with the help of the local people who are there. If you break this chain, the things will again reverse to the backside. The local people will get more resented. They will go for poaching. If you involve them, make them ownership, make them fully responsible for this, and possibly we may be able to manage better. I always think positive. After this COVID, this is the right time. People are not rushing to the places. Now we can harmonize that what kind of tourism is going to. When I was the field director in Assam, Manas, and the places like Kaziranga, we always feel very bad that we are all the time busy with tourism, wildlife tourism, and we get less chance. But now I have come on the other side. Now we really recognize that it is a very, very important part for the sustainability. Being a short time, I just want to stop myself. Thank you very much, Mandip.
Thank you, Santosh. Very well put. And I'm glad we are all on the same page. And we look forward to creating this special sort of a diploma course or a degree course or whatever in the future, so that we can get more enthusiastic students, for ecotourism and waving the flag continuously. Okay, people, I think we now need to break into our sort of discussion mode. And for that, I'm very quickly going to introduce all our panelists, and then we will field some questions between government and industry, and hopefully try and come to some sort of a conclusion. So let me start with Lakshman Krishnamurthy, who is with us from Kanha. He's the field director of Kanha. If you can just raise your hand. Of course, your name is displayed, so that's great. As I discovered, he's also not discovered, as I remembered, that he's also a wonderful recipient of this amazing award that was created by the World Wildlife India and the PATA, which is the Pacific Asia Travel Association. And it is called the Bagh Mitra Award. And I happen to be on the jury for the last so many years. And we know that this is a expression of the tourism industry really coming together and saying, let us honor these wonderful guys who are out in the field, and they're no different to the soldiers that fight at our borders and so on, which are anti-poaching or wonderful other stuff. So there is a prize that is given to a person, and there is a category of a prize given to the best managed national park. So I'm so delighted that Lakshman Krishnamurthy is with us. And on a lighter note, Krishna, if you grow those mustaches any longer, you'll have no problem in chasing away the poachers anyway. So keep up your good work. And let me come to our field director all the way from Kaziranga, who comes in with a 20-year service, also hugely awarded for his afforestation work with the MOEFCC award and also the Assam government award. So we are delighted that you will be talking and engaging with us. And from the industry side, we start with the Sardar with the long beard, and that is no other than Ravi Kalra, who runs a company called Travel In, which has been going since 1990 and does some significant amount of wildlife business from different parts of the world. And he is pretty aware of the sort of pain points of transacting this wildlife safaris and tourism in the different national parks of the country. So we will ask him to, Shoba, can you mute some of the speakers? I think we've got background noise
Yes, I'm just doing that.
from Santosh, I think. Sorry about that. So the next one we have is Varun Mathur, who represents Jungle Sutra, who actually was a marketing person with Shoba earlier, has now given way to his passion, as most of us in this wonderful tourism industry are driven by. And he works for Creative Travels under the brand called Jungle Sutra. And it's interesting that his designation is head of the jungle. Okay, so then we move on to our friend Ali Rashid, who is, of course, a great naturalist and a passionate environmentalist, and he owns and runs the Rainy Pani Lodge. And they also have the Jahan Numa Palace, which has been going on since 1983 in Bhopal. And it's a personal pleasure that I've actually done this amazing walk with him in the Satpura National Park, which is the walking safari, which of course Ali will explain is a result of some of the discussions which led to this wonderful expansion of the tourism experience for people. And I think that's the kind of thing that we are looking in many other national parks to take place. And finally, we have Anirudh Chowji, who is not only our treasurer of the RTSOI, but has a very unique short history of going from an entrepreneur in the private sector, creating pug marks for school students to do nature-based treks and holidays, and now has joined the government, and he works at the Tadoba National Park, earlier with Melghat. And he also comes with a lot of knowledge about what can be done now that he is on both sides of the fence. So may I just kick it off by asking Ravi to take on the first of his questions, which are the immediate pain points. And one of them I know, which is a burning issue in the industry, is that, given what has happened with COVID, excuse me, I think it's very important that whether as a private sector or as a government, we at least convey our sincerity to or our responsibility to the greater tourism fraternity. And I believe there are some issues where monies have been paid by customers who were stopped dead in their tracks thanks to the unfortunate COVID. But unfortunately, a lot of the state governments, forest departments have not refunded this, which has got some amount of tomato on our face and or egg on our face, and that is not so happy. So with that, Ravi, would you like to lead that question and a few other to the field directors, please?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I thank Mr. Pabla for establishing that tourism is as a tool of conservation, produce business in harmony with nature, and also the forest officer to become more tourism friendly. Now, these are all very good things to hear, but we will need to look at the reality and practicality of the things. The question is, are our forest officers as friendly as they ought to be? And are our policies as tourist friendly or as tourism friendly as they ought to be? First of all, if we have to look forward, Mandip, and we have to look at how we regenerate our businesses after the corona pandemic, we need to be very clear on certain directives of the park authorities. We need to be very clear as on to what are the costs going to be for the safaris till at least 2022. We are looking at booking positions for 21 onwards, and we don't even know how the park authorities will do, what they will do when it comes to raising their tickets, and when it comes to coming out with safari rules. So all I'm saying is, since it's established that tourism and forest department has to go hand in hand, and we have to harmonize conservation with tourism, which are more dependent on each other, I would like to, our park authorities, our forest departments to be very clear on entry costs for next 3 years, on rules for the jeeps, safaris, and everything, so that when we go to our operators or foreign markets, we are able to sell, not only for short term, we are able to sell for a long term. And we are able to tell them, okay, these are our prices, valid till 2022. There's going to be no change. And this is what you're going to get. Rather than having a sudden surprise thrown at us, park closed for census without any pre-information, bookings already confirmed, park closed for Wednesdays, park will be closed to, for this date, for this activity. What about the businesses which we already booked and taken a lot of pain to get into? So my question would be to all our dear field officers from Forest Department, that are we in practically as tourism friendly as we claim to be?
So Krishna, would you like to take that on first, and then we can ask Siva for his comments? I'm afraid it looks like we've not been able to get Manoj from Ranthmbhor, but if he logs in, wonderful. Otherwise, would you like to field it one by one, please, since you are the field directors?
Mr. Krishnamurthy, you're muted. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon to all. Thanks for inviting me in this webinar. So as Dr. Pabla sir told, in Madhya Pradesh, the tourism rules are well established and the procedures are very simple. I've gone through many questions also, which you shared with me. So as the rates, regarding the rate and all, already the last in the stakeholders meeting in the government of Madhya Pradesh, in Bhopal, so it was decided the rates for the next year will be only 10% increase. So this was informed last time only. So there is a clear-cut policy on pricing and all. And there are many other issues, questions also came. I just wanted to clarify that. Regarding the refunding, I think in Madhya Pradesh, I think almost for all the parks, we refunded all the money, except few parks. That's because of the COVID problem at the MP online side. So the refunding part, I think we paid it to all our guests back whenever we canceled our safaris. And regarding Mr. Kalra was telling the park is closed without any information. In Madhya Pradesh, I think the parks, tourism season is well defined from 1st October to then 30th June, and every Holi and Diwali is the national holidays, and those 2 days our park is closed, and every week on Wednesday afternoon it's a holiday. So regarding the park opening and closure, it's I think very well, clearly it has been spelled out in Madhya Pradesh. So we don't have any problem in that. So coming back to few points from my side, of course, we believe tourism is a tool for our conservation. We focus on tourism. Apart from tourism, our main role is conservation. So we of course, we do conservation also, and we promote tourism also. We have regular meetings with the stakeholders, and our job is also to provide employment to the local communities, and we have to involve all the stakeholders. We are trying to do all the best things possible in Madhya Pradesh. And the other important thing, as a park director, so what is tourism for me? For me, providing a responsible and wilderness experience inside the park is my duty. Not that it's a mass tourism inside the park. So I have to ensure all these things inside. Whenever my guests, my tourists, they enter the park, these things has to be followed, and they should go back with a rich experience of wildlife. So here comes, there were discussion on the increasing the vehicles, the carrying capacity and all. Let me say the facts from the Kanha Tiger Reserve. See, out of 270 days in a year, so only 40-45 days we have 100% booking. So we don't talk about the other things, other days, the remaining say 230 days, how to utilize that 100% carrying capacity. And there is a talk of diversifying the activities and all. We do diversify all the activities, but the tourism industry particularly, they are not promoting the many activities like nature walks, then camping, and we have night safaris and all. People ask why you are not allowing night safaris. We have night safari facilities. Every day we allow 5 vehicles. Hardly there are takers. So there are so many things already in place. There are so many things already available in the park. So those things are not completely utilized to the maximum potential. So the industry and the department, we should think over it, how to utilize that complete potential. So then we should think about, and moreover, yeah, of course, the other issue is also we have to promote the other buffer area tourism and other tourism in the territorial areas and all. So we have to think about that instead of asking or promoting the tourism only in the tiger reserve. So that's my point.
Yeah.
So then,
Krishna, can I interject here? There are 2 points. We'd like to keep this going as a discussion. So you raised the point about that the government has already made a decision of a 10% increase in prices, and that is likely to stay. I think what the industry and what I would also question here is that given the situation of COVID, given the fact that you're not going to have too many travelers coming out of the woodwork to go rushing into national parks because everybody is scared, would it not be a futuristic policy to actually reduce that 10%, slash it away, and in fact, reduce another further 10%, because this is a challenging time. And how do you actually get not only your international traveler, because they are not going to start until maybe early next year. I don't think anybody is going to come back in the post-monsoon when your parks open in October, November, because simply the international flights are not going to be totally buzzing. There'll be a lot of protocols, and there will be a kind of a hampering to that growth. So that is one question for us really to think about, that what are the little lollipops that we can offer to the industry so that they can go and promote. And I think this is something that we need to do jointly. I mean, I'll give you the analogy of the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, which is the fountainhead for all the mountaineering peaks. And every mountain peak has a royalty, just like you have a royalty or a charge for going into a national park. There again, the thinking is that maybe we need to reduce the fees. We need to make these lollipops for people to come, because we are, in a special spot. So I think that is something certainly we want to leave for you. And I want to give you one piece of good news. And the good news is, just as we are aware that a lot of travelers are the pain points, or indeed the lack of the industry knowledge, which you very rightly pointed out, is that if we don't do alternatives of night safaris, of going to different parks, I think there are 2 things here. One is that we are launching a responsible traveler campaign, which the Ministry of Tourism in conjunction with our society is going to do, in which we will talk about all these things. And we will talk about that you're not supposed to run after the tiger alone. You're supposed to enjoy the jungle in its holistic sort of magic, and all that will come through. But may I also say that at that point, perhaps we need to, in conjunction with some of our private lodges and the forest department, just go way, way beyond the current scenario of the quality of interpretation of the guides. Because, like many of us, we've traveled around the world, and we can see, and I can tell you, in my personal case, I was in the jungles of the Amazon in Peru, and we were just arrested for about 45 minutes trying to study the butterfly ant, doing its little job. And I mean, that's the kind of magic I know a lot of naturalists bring. So I thought I'll park that with you. But let me now come across to Siva for his comments before, you come back with us with some further ammo. Siva, over to you.
Mandy, can I quickly butt in and add one more very strong pain point, which since we have different field directors with us, the pain point is synergy between the parks. I mean, Krishnamurthy ji just mentioned that Madhya Pradesh has refunded the safari amount. What about Ranthmbhor? What about Rajasthan? They're not even talking about it. There's no synergy here. So if we give a very good park experience in, let's say, Madhya Pradesh, the experience has to be duplicated in Kaziranga, in Ranthmbhor, so that we are on that same pledge. So I'm sorry I had to interject, but there's a pain point here. If Madhya Pradesh is doing something which is right, why not the same thing is being looked at or duplicated by Ranthmbhor, or let's say Kaziranga? Thank you.
Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful point. Well taken, I'm sure. And I'll field that over to Siva. And basically, we need to evolve a strategy where, some of these best practices can, of course, flow into all our national parks. That would be a great sort of a target to have. So over to you, Siva, for your comments first. I think you're on mute. Sorry, you are on mute.
He's not on mute, Mandy, unable to hear him.
Oh.
Yes, so he has to probably log in again. Can't hear him.
Oh dear.
Okay. So I know I'll put it on the chat.
Okay. So if you tell him, then we can go quickly back to Krishna for his supplementary comment on that. You need to be off mute, Krishna.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So regarding the pricing and all, in Madhya Pradesh since 2016, we have not increased any entry fee for the last 4 years. And for the next year, I think the government has decided 10% increase, but I think I'm not the right person to comment on that, whether it will be increased or it will be retained. Certainly I can take these points and I can discuss with the government or Chief Wildlife Warden. So coming back to the pricing, what you are talking is that in Madhya Pradesh, we charge 1,500 rupees per vehicle for 6 persons. So we talk about responsible tourism. In responsible tourism, I do believe, my personal view is that we have to help the conservation and the local communities. In Madhya Pradesh, whatever we get the tourism receipts, 33% we share with the local communities who are bearing the cost of the conservation. So by reducing this price, you are going to deprive some resources to the local communities. We are all talking about the supporting the local communities in increasing the employment opportunities. And moreover, this money is also plowed back for conservation works. So do we really think that 1,500 rupees per vehicle is too high in this tourism sector currently? If you see a person who comes from any place, how much percentage will be this cost? So my personal view and request is that this money is used for conservation and for local communities. I think we should stick to what the current rates are there. If not, there is an increase at least. I think we should not ask for any reduction in the entry tickets. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, I will ask my other colleagues to respond on that. I think you make a valid point. If it is that amount right now, maybe we should stick with it, although there are many other ways that tourism can support.
And one more thing, in Madhya Pradesh, we don't charge multiple charges also, like camera fee or other things. Only one fee we take, and we don't take other fees. So it's fair enough. The rate is, I don't think it's very high when a person who comes to Kanha and all. And the third point I want to make is that regarding the promoting other areas, though we are sitting in Kanha, my Fen Wildlife Sanctuary, the tour operators and the resort owners and the guides, they are not willing to take the guests to Fen Sanctuary. It's just 60 kilometers from Mukki Gate. So we have to explore those unknown areas, wilderness areas to promote tourism. So that is also very, very important. It's the responsibility of the tourism industry also to focus on those lesser known places right now.
No doubt, no doubt. And I think, as I mentioned, there are many other ways of coming around to tourism dollars, tourism rupees, supporting communities such as foundations that were created, I think, in, Bandhavgarh or something between industry and government. But yeah, at 1,500, I do accept the point. But the other small corollary, which I think Ravi made earlier, was that because you're dealing both with domestic and international tourism, please at least freeze the rates, that there will be no increase for the next 3 years. Because if you understand the tourism process, they put it into a brochure, they promote the brochure, 1 year later it is sold, second year it is transacted. So in the middle, if there is a hike, then obviously the private sector has to bear the brunt. So point well made. But let me ask Varun, I think he was raising a point, and possibly Anirudh, because they are a little aware of all these price structures and what the other issues are. So Varun, why don't you go ahead and...
See, I think, I think the point made by Mr. Kalra, and as well as, what you said about 1,500 rupees, it's not much. But I think what Mr. Kalra was trying to get at is a broader perspective of lack of consistency. We think about our parks or a particular state and the parks that there are in, but we need to look at India as a broader segment. We have different rules, and I know it's all state run and I'm trying to oversimplify, but we need to simplify things for travelers from overseas. They do not understand these logics where, you have, you can do private game safaris in Madhya Pradesh, but you can't do them in Karnataka. Or, in some areas, a lodge naturalist can be a driver, but in other parks, they cannot. This adds an additional person in the vehicle. So we are losing out on a seat. Those are little things that need to be considered. Within MP itself, we have some parks that follow the GPS system, some parks that don't. So if you're traveling with a guest, you need to explain all of this. And I think it is a great thing that MP does not, it has one consolidated fee and you do not have camera fee, because that can be further cumbersome, because, you're traveling to, let's say, Gujarat. You are paying, X amount of money per camera, per safari. We need to popularize the natural diversity of India. India needs to be seen as a wildlife destination in itself. It does not have to be known just for Taj Mahal or whatever. And we have so much to talk about, not just tigers. When we travel overseas, we realize many people don't even realize how much there is in India, and that is the point I think Mr. Kalra was trying to drive, that on a broader perspective, if you can look at, have some uniformity. I know it's all state run, but have some uniformity within the tiger reserves, where some basics remain the same, whereas if somebody wants to do an exclusive drive, you can do an exclusive drive. I think that is something to think about for a longer term, rather than, just a focus point being pricing. I agree with you. Pricing, yes, 1,500 rupees is something that is doable. But as Mandip pointed out, we are trying to look at a longer term where we freeze the time over maybe 2 or 3 years at least, because we are selling in the future. We are not selling for somebody who's traveling next week or 2 months down the line. We are selling to somebody who's maybe a year or 2 years away from traveling to India.
Mandy,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I just wanted to say, for Varun's question, Mr. Shiv Kumar is there.
Yes, I just saw him coming back. So I hope your audio is good, Shiva. And over to you. Maybe you can feel that question and what Krishna had talked about earlier. How easy do you think, as far as your park is concerned first, and how do you think, is there a way that we can create a mechanism which is taking some of the best practices, sharing it together? I don't know, even Harbhajan could come in later and say, can we create this kind of a component within the Amity course that is done for senior officers, so they understand that we need to rationalize, tourism and tourism's kind of price structures to some degree, and camera fees and all these little things that have been going on for years, and sorry, Harbhajan, did you want to say something now? No. Okay, so why don't we ask Shiva to give his comment?
Shiva, we can't, Shiv Kumar sir, we can't hear you again.
Oh dear.
Okay.
Now?
I take Mr. Varun's question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding the rules and policies which he is talking about, I am talking with respect to Madhya Pradesh. So in our state, I think the rules and regulations across the parks, it's almost same. There will be minor local rules which we impose. Like he was talking about GPS in Kanha. So why we went to that model GPS? Because if the tourism industry, that the vehicle owners, drivers, guides, if they do responsibly the tourism inside the park, then there is no need for me to do the policing work. So what is happening is this tourism parks, you have a lot of vehicles. So there is always the overcrowding and garrowing the animal. So, and we want to monitor the vehicles movement also. Because of that, we have introduced that app. I'm telling you, because of that app, that we get good feedback from even the guests that wilderness experience in Kanha is better than any other park. So these are all the positives of that technology.
Sir,
I think we should.
Oh my God, Shoba, we put Krishna on mute.
I think I'm audible now. Yeah.
Now you're
So,
audible, yeah.
yeah. I just wanted to answer Mr. Vanu's question that
Sir, I completely agree with you, but I think Bandhavgarh, Panna, everything else should also follow the same. Because I think it's a fantastic thing that Pench and Kanha are doing with the GPS system.
And I will experience I will share my experiences about the usage of this app, Bagheera app. We also take the feedback about the behavior of the guides, drivers, and the experience inside the park and the facilities available for the tourists. So that's an important feedback for me to improve, to provide the facilities to the guests and also the other facilities inside the park. So it's a very useful app. I think it has been recognized by even NTCA that it's an innovative app, and we are doing it in Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah, let me go to Anirudh, who's also got a point here. And again, he knows of certain best practices before I come to Ali, because I think one of the star experiences that I have seen is the walking safari. And Ali, you should be asking, how we can replicate that, because that to my mind is such a unique and a wonderful experience, and it can certainly be done in many parks. So over to you, Anirudh.
Thanks, Manny. Krishna, so amazing. We've been hearing so much about Kanha, and especially this part where you're taking the feedback from the customers, as we will call them. It's brilliant. Something that other places also should start. Tadoba benefited immensely ever since we started taking feedback. The point you are making is also very valid. Ravi, so this is something that we said, safaris are great. When Krishnamurthy sir mentioned about the activities. So initially when Tadoba introduced, we have about 10 activities which people can do other than going on a safari. So initially, these activities were totally not bought. Nobody even bothered to go for these activities. So this is where we realized that the travel operators and the resort owners, more to do with the resort owners, they always went for the lowest hanging fruit and always went for the tiger. It was very simple. And Bushmevi, they wanted to only see one of our tigers is called Maya, T12, and nothing else. So even if there was an elephant which had climbed the tree, no, I'm not interested in seeing that, I want to see the tiger. But went to that extent. But then again, what Krishna sir mentioned, the stakeholders. So earlier, the resort owners were, they're looked upon as enemies of the forest. At Tadoba, we started this process of identifying stakeholders, and resort owners and travel operators became our major stakeholders, along with the guides and drivers and other. Only when the discussion started did people realize, oh, we also have a boating, we have a cycling, we have beautiful nature trail, we can sit on a machan, we can sit on a log hut at night. So involving the stakeholders became a major part of the success of these activities. But yeah, without people's involvement, I mean, we can run many activities where no one will buy them. Thanks.
Okay, that's very useful. So Ali, why don't you give your comments, and then I'm going to pose the question to Harbhajan, because we need to institutionalize this mechanism of the osmosis of good ideas between the park directors, obviously, right? So why don't you give us your comments and your feedback in terms of Satpura, and I know now you are going to operate in Bori, which is a good example of actually popularizing a lesser known park. And I think lodge owners and tour operators absolutely, like Krishna said, have the responsibility of going and doing that extra bit. And that is one of the things that we want to promote through the RT, the Responsible Traveler campaign. And yes, like you mentioned, Krishna, we are also bringing out an app in which there will be a responsible traveler situation where you know what the guidelines are for the traveler, for the industry, and we will also have a mechanism of a feedback, which is that, say, somebody is littering in the national park, for example, or doing something wrong. Just like the police have an app where you can take a photograph and it sends you the location there and then, we'll instigate that. And at the same time, we want to encourage good actions, and we are thinking of a plan of what we would call our members the honorary ecotourism wardens. So you give a sense of responsibility to the people who are going in and to behave, responsibly. So Ali, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Am I audible? Yeah. Yeah, so just talking quickly about the Satpura model, as Anirudh was also saying, like in Tadoba, they've started offering so many different activities. And Satpura from the start, in the last 10 years, actually, Dr. Pabla was also instrumental in designing that model. And Mr. Krishnamurthy has also been the field director there. So we do, apart from the jeep safaris, we do obviously the walking, the canoeing. Mandy, you've experienced the camping. And we've actively promoted this as a park which is beyond the tigers. We also do night drives where we are seeing animals which you don't see in the day. So partly what Mr. Krishnamurthy was saying, all these are part of the MP park rule. That's why we can do it in Satpura, and each park is allowed camping in the buffer. But unfortunately, and it's good for us because we kind of claim it as an exclusive activity. But in other parks, people are not really utilizing those facilities which are sort of given by the forest department. So that is, one thing. But what Dr. Pabla was saying, I think by diversifying the activities, some of the questions that I had is by diversifying activities, we can actually utilize more of the area of the park. I know we are governed, by NTCA guideline that doesn't allow more than 20%. But somehow as an industry, we need to actively engage in, a discussion with NTCA to enable larger areas with lower impact. And there you can do some jeep drives, you can do cycling, you can do camping, walking, and actually have a larger area, under the park. So that was one of the questions which I wanted to ask also the forest department people and the other panelists who are here. Apart from that, also one thing which I know a lot of people have an issue with, not in Satpura that much, but in the other parts, is the roster system, which I think, Mandy, you also mentioned that guides are very important. I believe that till there's a roster, a guide will never be motivated to become better because they know mera number to aane wala hai next time, So as soon as there's a bit of incentive to be able to, have a booking system, then only the guides will be motivated to improve. And same way with the jeeps also, like lodge, as a lodge owner, in Satpura, we have because there's a river, so forest department operates the vehicle, so it's a completely different model. But in the other parks, in MP and maybe other places also, but definitely in MP, there's a mandatory roster which has to be followed. So if you're say a high-end lodge, you cannot utilize your vehicle and you have to take a vehicle from a running roster, which could be good, which could be bad, and there's no incentive because it's number is going to come next. So there is a waiting charge which you can pay, but that is not driving a fair model. And lastly, the third thing is about the pricing which we were discussing. I think the price is good, that 1500 at least in MP is not much. But I just had a question. Last year we had a meeting where, a year ago there was a stakeholder meeting where the government decided to freeze these rates for, I think, 5 years, to keep the stability going. But now I think it has changed to an increase. So I'm not for reducing because we know that it goes for conservation. But definitely in this uncertain time, if we can freeze it for at least a 3 to 5 year period, that will really help in promoting long term, just like Varun and Mr. Kalra was saying. So with that, I'll just hope I can, get some responses.
Thanks, Ali. That was a valid point, and I think we take a strong point about this whole price structuring. My only subsidiary point to that is that I wish that the national parks would also come out with some clear guidelines as far as the post-COVID rules. And in that, we also need to understand whether, just like we've done it in trekking and rafting and several disciplines, a very, very specific thing on the type of wildlife safari. So if it's a walking safari, what's the protocol? If it's a canoe safari, what's the protocol? And if it's a jeep safari, what's the protocol? And therefore, if it requires us to have 2 customers in a jeep because of COVID, I don't know, whatever is evolving, we need to create that, we need to freeze the price on it and then communicate it out. And obviously, we need to keep a little bit of an eye on the price structures when COVID regulations hit. And then on a longer term, I think it's totally fair to say that, 1500 per se is not an issue. And of course, we can harmonize many things. May I ask now, Harbhajan, for your comment on this very crucial aspect, which is that clearly we've got some great practices happening. Clearly, we need to allow them to seep into other states. How can we use a vehicle to create that mechanism where we communicate, maybe even on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis? Perhaps we can get Amity involved, or a forum or a webinar or something very simple as a call to action where we get a bunch of private industry people, we get a bunch of our field directors and we say, okay, let's get the ball rolling. And from there, maybe we can, establish whether do we have to have the center involved, we have only at a state level. So over to you, what are your thoughts? Because that clearly is one of the biggest pebbles in the shoe of tourism as I see it now.
Thank you, Mandy. I think there are 3 action points where we need to become active. One is about finding out the good practices and spreading them over to places which are not following them. I don't think the park directors or park managers can do that because they are concerned with their areas. Are the best they have access to their own state government, and all governments are independent. I think it is the duty of bodies like RTSOI, industry representatives, whose number one first should document all the best practices, then maybe create model practices which everybody should follow, and then engage with whoever makes the decisions, both at Government of India level and the state level, park directors level, so that they go down to the people who actually have to implement them. So first job for RTSOI would be to document them. You don't have to maybe order a study or anything because your people are everywhere. So if you get the rules and regulations from everyone, then ask somebody in one of the members or some consultant, somebody to kind of amalgamate them into something model which everybody should follow. I think everybody would be keen to do that. Park directors, the states would be very happy to do that. Only thing is because it's changes very regularly. Today you don't know it's there, tomorrow it's not there. And if I think it comes from a respected body like yours, and maybe you can have a directive issued from Government of India, although it's not binding on the states, but definitely they heed to what Government of India says. If not in the Tigers, of course, Tigers, NTC's advice is binding, but any directive from Government of India do have a value. So best would be for us to consolidate, compile the list of best practices, and then see who makes the decisions and interact with them. Second part is about industry not selling anything other than game drive. This has been a big pain for me. My very keen interest was on promoting everything except game drives. But because nobody wanted them, nobody sold them, so I rather retired a very disappointed person, except that we were able to push our ideas in Satpura to a little bit. Although not everything we wanted to do Satpura we did, but as the game drive, canoe drive, they became popular and they now stabilized. And every time I asked the park directors, why are you not pushing these things? They would always say, sir, nobody wants them. I had some meetings with the industry, local lodges. Everybody said, yes, we'll promote. I think probably the fault is not only with the industry, as much our fault. We have not actually put our hearts behind this thing. We have not publicized, we have not reached out to the industry. Yes, next year, if you don't bring this, we are going to be tough on you. We'll have some negative thoughts about you, something like that. But I think if we send the message across and do create an opportunity for people to experience the park in different ways, It may not happen in 1 year or 2 years, 3 years, but as we have done in Satpura, I think it will happen everywhere because there are people who have varied interests. And this is a great way of minimizing the impact while maximizing the gains from tourism. I think third action area, Mandy, would be to interact with the NTCA quickly, because to me, these three things in the NTCA guidelines have been hurting. One is the concept of tourism zone. So that, I mean, we concentrate, we confine, we pile up all the impact into the best parts of the park, which we always wanted to protect actually. Because tourism was happening in the best parts before NTCA came into being. So then they said you cannot go beyond that. Some parks don't even have 20, Satpura, if I remember, doesn't have more than 5% area open to tourism. So the number one, our gains from tourism are very low. Number two, we are impacting the areas that we want to protect the first possible way. So I don't think the NTCA guidelines are cast in stone. Even Supreme Court said in its order that we are not sanctifying these guidelines. If anybody is unhappy with these guidelines, then you can go to the NTCA, and if necessary, you can come back to us. So number one is the tourism zone concept. I think number two is that the way we calculate the carrying capacity. Not that I want more vehicles to go into these limited areas, but I want people to go into larger areas and larger numbers so that the gains are maximized. The way we calculate carrying capacity, the methodology might be a little suspect, but I think the intention is to keep the pressure minimum in those areas while confining in small areas. I think we have to improve on both sides. Number one, the way we calculate carrying capacity. I think there are any number of models all over the world. This was a method which somehow NTCA selected, which was initially not meant for regulating vehicular traffic. It was meant for regulating traffic on trails, on walking trails, and then it was adapted for doing it here. And I think the third point is that NTCA guidelines do not talk about any other activity at all other than game drives. They only talk about carrying capacity in terms of vehicles. That is the one area where I think we should interact with NTCA to tell them, if you want to minimize impact on the parks, they are rightly concerned about the impact on the parks. So the way is to, number one, disperse your tourism as far as possible. Number two, change the way you calculate carrying capacity. And thirdly, tell your park director, field directors, and the states to promote other modes of enjoying parks. I don't think we can leave it to park directors and local lodge owners only. I think we have a very wonderful setup now in RTSOI. And you have your reach. You can always talk to people in Delhi. If Delhi people can influence everything that happens on the ground. So I think larger responsibility lies with RTSOI now, rather than only with the parks and the lodges. Thank you.
Okay, that is actually very useful. And because in most of these webinars, we always want to have a kind of a practical call to action button that we must always press. Can I request Krishna, and I'm sorry we've lost our other park directors on the panel, Shiva, who couldn't get in because of some audio issues, and Manoj is probably chasing some poachers or tigers or whatever. But I think most of the important contours we've sort of traversed over here. And Harbhajan, absolutely point well taken. We've got a lot of work. I know that we've all been working together, yourself as one of the key leads with our CII National Committee on Tourism, which is also driving, along with RTSOI and TOFT, initiative to respond to the draft ecotourism guidelines of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. So policy. I think a lot of these areas will, the policy, yes. So hopefully the next webinar, we get into some micro things. I can see a lot of questions now going up. So Shoba, do we have some time before we close to take on about 10-15 minutes of questions?
Yes, we are actually already 2 minutes beyond our time, but I think we should quickly take about 3-4 questions, primarily addressing some of the key points that were spoken about here. Should I take it on,
so
or will you do it?
Yeah, you take them on. But can I just ask Krishna, since we've got you as our captive today, can you help us by putting, if we can do an email loop, so that when we walk away from here, we will have some follow-through action? And can we talk to you and my industry colleagues here, and we'll put, Harbhajan in a mail, and all of us to just get the ball rolling. Let's just quickly put down a set of best practices, a set of pain points that you think, the travel industry or the tour operators or travelers should be doing. And we will take it over to our industry friends at different forums and start, chanting that mantra of the right action that is needed. So that after today, the one thing I don't really like is that you come on podiums and all of us give great ideas, but nothing happens. So I want to make sure that it's going to go and hit somewhere on the ground. So over to you, Shoba. Let's get a few questions that are crucial, and then we can field it across to our panel.
Absolutely. So we have a question from our ambassador, Dr. Latika Nand. For MP parks, could research be shared with stakeholders? This is important, as without translation of research findings and recommendations into a form that the common man can use, there will never be true understanding of what is happening with the parks. Unnecessary rules need to be stopped, like not being able to be allowed to put down windshields.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Krishnamurthy sir, you want to take that on?
I think whatever the research has been done in the different parts, so once the research paper is finalized or when they submit the report, it's available in our library, particularly in Kanha. So I think anybody can come and they can access our research papers or the book, whatever they submitted. So that's the first part. Second part is regarding the unnecessary rules. And so actually see, these rules are evolved over the years. It has not come yesterday. So we had every year stakeholder meeting, all the decisions were almost, so all the decisions were, all the issues were discussed, then we decided. Like some, Mr. Ali was raising the roster system, the naturalists are not allowed to drive and all. So that's not an issue because the roster system was brought basically to bring a decorum at the gate and to provide facilities to the guests so that easily they will get a vehicle. So otherwise what will happen, there used to be a lot of problem even in Kanha before this roster system. So the roster system has brought a sense of discipline, and there is no problem in the gate when you go in the early morning in Kanha, in any gate, Mukhi or Katia gate. So that we consider these points, but we have to provide employment to the local community. So the roster system is the best possible methodology which we are adopting right now. And for regarding the guides and all, you were telling the guides are not educated. We do regular trainings and all. There is a system of grading in Madhya Pradesh, the G1, G2, and as we get the feedback from the guests, and we conduct every year that some test, and we upgrade and also we downgrade also. So there is always incentive for the guides to learn. So that is one of the best practices which we are following here. Following in Kanha. So I can share the best tourism management practices of Kanha with the panel.
I think, Krishna, what might be very useful going forward is actually having a closer kind of a conjunction with our tourism industry. For example, your guides could be very good in their, let's say, the spotting knowledge, for example, but they may not have such a great ability to communicate. They may not necessarily have the manners or the mannerisms needed for client handling. And I think these soft skills are where our bodies can come in, like the lodge owners, the Federation of Restaurants and Hotels, because even in rural tourism, the government of India tried this in the past, where there was these organizations from the private industry trying to help with these soft skills. And I would love, when you do your grading, to have a member of the private industry sit on your grading panel and say that, does it meet the requirement? Because they are seeing it from the eyes of the consumer. So maybe that kind of synergy is what we want to bring on the ground. So just one suggestion, and I'm sure a lot of these ideas we can evolve and mature. And it is, basically trying to see how we can always better a system. So, given that,
my proposal for this is that, see, every year we do training to our guides and all. Why don't somebody who is interested, who want to give some inputs to my guides about the handling the guest and their behavior or some knowledge, so they can come and they can give maybe 1 or 2 sessions they can handle. We welcome anyone who wants to contribute and
that's
improving the skills.
there's one positive point right now, and I will put it to my industry colleagues, the lodge owners, that we must have a system where we can give these guest lectures on absolutely all this kind of
and even for grading also, we not only take the department, we call the local naturalist and the local resort owners to decide the grading, and also we involve them also. It's not that only department Kanha is doing it.
Yes,
Cool.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Okay.
Varun has a question. Go ahead, Varun.
It's related to what you've just been talking about. I think there is a sort of a feedback system on the GPS app that you have, but the challenge that I have seen is not many guides would ask us as guests to actually give that feedback. And that is something, if that can be monitored better, you will have instant feedback on your system in the way that you want to collect it.
Yeah, Mr. Varun, yeah, we know that, sometimes the guests also don't give, but this is a system which we just started 2 years back. I say even out of 100 guests, even if 60% if they give a feedback, it gives what direction or what inputs I am getting it. So I think we should be happy even if 70% of the people, if they give the feedback, I think it's a fair data, so I can assess the...
No, I always like to say that, we must remind ourselves when we are all particularly in anguish or in a charged up sort of activist role, and we want to better things. Rome was not built in a day. But so long as we know that we are on the right track and we are going in the right direction, it's, thumbs up. So, Shoba, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, there are several questions. I'd like to take a couple of them because they are directly in line with what is being discussed. One is from Archana Singh, who says, as per the Indian Wildlife Act 1980, tourism is still considered as an anti-forestry activity, which in other terms means it is harmful to the forest. Whereas globally, we have seen many cases like gorilla tourism, etc., has played a pivotal role in conservation. Why do you think India still doesn't consider ecotourism as conservation tool to safeguard our forest and wildlife residing in them?
So I should ask Harbhajan to come in, because I know we have some good news lurking on the side. So why don't you reveal it, Harbhajan?
I don't know which good news you talk about, Mandy, but I don't think her impression is correct. Ecotourism or tourism in the Wildlife Protection Act is not a prohibited activity. So we've been doing it forever, and we'll probably continue to do. It was going to become a prohibited activity, not because the law wanted it, but there was some government India directive, but now there's no. So it's allowed. Although sometimes some people, try to interpret the law in a slightly different way. There's one word called inviolate areas in tiger reserves. So inviolate means even tourism is prohibited. So it's a question of how you interpret it, but the law very clearly says Chief Wildlife Warden can allow people to enter parks for the purpose of tourism. So let's not, so it's not prohibited at all.
Yeah, actually, I was alluding to the paper that we've been working on the draft ecotourism policy, where at least the government has agreed, that ecotourism will be considered a forest activity.
So it's not related to the Wildlife Act, it's related to the Forest Conservation Act.
Correct. Yeah,
so
but that's a good silver lining.
Government India had sent out some circulars, not exactly circulars, written to some states in the context of some specific projects, which they did not see as something which should go with the regular forestry activities. But those letters got circulated all over the country. People started interpreting them that ecotourism is completely unwanted activity in the forest. So now in the new draft ecotourism policy which the government of India circulated, they have, I think the most crucial point is that they will now recognize tourism everywhere in the forest areas, not as a non-forestry activity. They recognize it as a part of what we call incidental to conservation.
Thank you, sir. There is this one question from Sharavanan, which is directly in line with what we've been trying to do at RTSOI, which is about trying to make the travelers responsible. He says he's been doing a lot of trips in most of the parks like Kaziranga, Kanha, etc. Even though a lot of instructions are being given for the drivers and naturalists about the discipline to be followed inside and during sighting, everything vanishes the minute the sighting happens. Should we think about giving an orientation to the tourists before they enter inside the park? Mandip, can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. This is a absolutely done deal. It is part of the guideline, and as I said, if we design an intelligent app where we can actually also garner some amount of wrong action, because I think we are fed up in India in general about not being able to point a finger sometimes when wrong actions are done, because it's not the done thing. I mean, you see a guy spitting on the road or doing something stupid, I think somebody needs to have a reporting mechanism. You can't go on this thing. So it is part and parcel of the responsible traveler situation of a feedback mechanism. And I hope we'll be able to sensitize people in a more proactive and a more incentivized way of being more responsible. So I hope all that will kick in.
So one last question, and this is, I think, more for the tour operators and lodge owners and what they think, is that it's about pricing strategy. Pirzada Fayaz Ahmed from Kashmir, and he says hello to you, Mr. Kalra. Why shouldn't we have lesser entry fee for Indian nationals and increases in the foreigners' entry beside additional fee for movie cameras and professionals? We must encourage school and college students visit these parks and sanctuaries at a very nominal or no fee. So,
who's taking that on?
Do you want me to take this question, Mandy?
Yes, Raviji, if Mr. Kalra, if you can, and then we'll have Mr. Pabla give his points of view on that.
Yeah, okay. You see, point taken, but the thing is, see, there are two types. And you speak of students, yes, there is a need to sensitize our students, to make them aware of our heritage, of our national parks, of our flora, fauna. And definitely, yes, that's something which the government should really seriously think. If there are student groups, and it's a study tour, there should be a different pricing for a study tour. That I totally and completely agree with. But when it comes to a difference between a foreign tourist and a domestic tourist, that probably is an area where I would not rather go, because the most of the damage to the national parks is being done by the domestic tourism, who takes their chips packet with them, who are eating and spitting and doing all sorts of damages to the park and bringing a sort of so there, if you want to stop the mass tourism into the parks, then you have to make it worth its while. So the moment you reduce the fee to the domestic tourist, it becomes a recreational activity for him, and he litters and he shouts and he does every sort of thing. But if you make it expensive, he understands the value of the visit to the park, and he gives a lot of respect to what he sees. And also we have this capacity problem in the park, the carrying capacity problem. So if the tourism has to happen, and if you have lower tickets for the domestic tourism, there would be no foreigners be able to enter or get the jeeps, because there'll be no carrying capacity. So I think I'm quite happy as a tour operator. The perspective, I'm quite happy with no disparity between a domestic and a foreign tourist in the ticket pricing. But yes, the students, that's a very valid point. And I've said what I wanted.
For students, I just wanted to say in Madhya Pradesh, for students, we give 50% reduction in the ticket. So I think any educational institutes, when they want to take a tour to any park in Madhya Pradesh, but the thing is that they have to give an application to us. So we will reduce 50% price. And coming back to some other question regarding the rules and regulations, and also government indeed supports the ecotourism and promotes ecotourism. As a park manager, I have to adhere to the rules and regulations of the state government and NTC and government of India. So I have to work with these all the rules and regulations. So the rules are there to make the tourism more responsible and to provide better experience to the guests. That's
okay.
I want to.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Sir, Mr. Pabla, you want to take, you want to say something?
Yeah, only small. We used to have differential rates for foreigners and Indians, and the pressure at that time used to be to have one single uniform rate, because it was somehow seen as below our dignity. Because we thought we were a growing economy, we become world power or something, so we shouldn't be treating foreigners differently than us. So we continue to raise the prices for Indians so that they finally now have merged. I think let's stay with that, number one. Number two, Ravi, I think our parks are much cleaner. Even Indian visitors are now much more responsible than what they used to be. I think the major need is to clean up the environment around the parks, outside the park, where industry has to play a role. Because we see a lot of garbage around the parks in the villages where your lodges are located, and we damage their infrastructure, use their resources, and they suffer a lot because of our presence there. Although there are some benefits, but I think there are negatives as well. But inside the park, I think I've seen a major transformation now. I never see a chips bag or a polythene bag or even a bottle of water inside the park these days. So that's one.
Yeah, I agree. This has become far better. Yes, I agree with you.
I think
Absolutely.
but I think a major effort has to be mounted by the industry and the parks and maybe civil administration to clean up the areas outside the parks, because the damage is the same. Where ultimately all the garbage is going to go into our drainage systems, into our rivers, and into the sea. Then we are going to kill whatever the garbage kills. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Pabla. That's
you.
a fantastic point, because like responsible tourism, like RTSOI believes, the integrity of upholding the destination is one of the primary responsibilities of the traveler and the tour operator, to keep it pristine and clean. And the resources that are available, first of all, belongs to the community and the resident and the host communities. Thank you for that. One interesting thing that goes about, it talks about communication and marketing, is from Akhilesh Dubey, and this is our last question. It's time to change wildlife sales and marketing strategy. Indian wildlife should not be run around tigers only. Time to give slogan and market more aggressively about Indian wildlife beyond tigers. And some collectively work on basic infrastructure of lesser known parks and sanctuaries to grab the attention of domestic as well as international travelers.
I think that's a given, isn't it? So, Dr. Pabla, I think that we are all on the same page. That
I think if Satpura has done well, Ali is happy, and people who visit that park are happy, any park can do well.
I think that is already happening, and there are a lot more smaller parks that even travel operators are focusing on now. And a lot of new experiences are being explored. West Bengal, there are some very interesting parks which are being explored. You know, Ladakh, Himachal. I mean, there's so much being done. So that is already something which is in play, and we'll see results very soon.
Absolutely. Any other questions, Ali, Varun, Ravi ji?
I have one last thing that I want to talk about, and I know there are certain parks that do it very well, and then there are certain parks where it is completely lacking, and that is restroom facilities within the park, a 4-hour drive. And I know Central Indian parks have done a fantastic job. You know, Kanha has amazing loos, Pench has an amazing loos. You know, places like Ranthmbhor, and I'm sorry I couldn't address this to Mr. Manoj, but you go in for a safari, there's no loos available, and the chowkis that you stop at, you know, a large number of people are just going in and around that area. But I guess that infrastructure can be put in as, you know, seen in Central India. So that is something that, you know, if we are sending a whole bunch of people inside, we need to put in this basic infrastructure, and, you know, a clean loo is something that can be managed, I think, in my mind.
Excellent point, Varun.
One more
Ali,
thing,
sorry.
Shoba. I mean, there's this practice of checking passports physically before you enter the park. Now the post-COVID, I mean, and to promote the contactless travel, and, you know, to avoid the contact as much as possible, there should be something done about checking, physical checking of passports. I think they'll have to evolve a system where a lodge owner should be responsible for doing that exercise and providing those photocopies to the park authorities, rather than the clients carrying their passports in the early mornings or during the game drives and that being physically checked. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Ravi, I think these and many other suggestions that had come in earlier and so on, we are going to put this in a working document and start sharing with our parks, and make sort of a plan. It's all well made. I think, Shoba, we need to probably close. Before we do that, we need to ask our President Rakesh Mathur to come and give a very quick comment and perhaps a vote of thanks for all our wonderful panelists. And if he is somewhere connected, then over to him.
He is. And Saurav, if you can make Mr. Mathur as a panelist, please. Thank you. Mr. Mathur? Mr. Mathur?
It's Rakesh Mathur, right?
Yes, Mr. Rakesh.
It is Rakesh Mathur.
Yeah, he's there. I can see him there.
Okay.
Yeah, he's there.
I mean, as a good Mathur in India, he might have had the call of food or some delectable Kanha that they are famous for. But anyhow,
he's there.
I think I see him.
Yes.
Okay, can I?
There you are.
Am I heard?
Yeah, but not seen.
Not seen.
You're like the tiger, heard but not seen. Reveal yourself.
Yes, sir. We see you. Yeah,
okay, come along.
Okay, Mandy, let me just first say what an interesting and what a riveting discussion this has been. And even before Mr. Pabla came back, Dr. Pabla came back the second time, I had already penned my thought that RTSOI is going to form some kind of a committee to formulate a review mechanism for all these various discrepancies that have been brought to our attention, whether it is charging of fees, whether it is different policies, issues that Varun spoke about. And I was going to request Dr. Pabla to chair this committee. So, Dr. Pabla, I think this is one point I'm going to ask Mandy to take you upon, because I think your guidance and your whole thought process on this whole issue is so interesting that as an RTSOI team, and you are one of our honorary members and mentors. So I'm going to request you to take that on. I had flagged a few issues. I think one of the key things that comes out here is that it is the responsibility of the tourism fraternity to sell things other than tiger. And I think we have a great role to play in there. And also, for example, if you look at places like Bhitar Kanika, the Chabbal Wildlife Sanctuary, the Eagle Nest, the Snake Park in Bangalore, the Crocodile Park in Chennai. I mean, these products, these parks are not marketed the way they should be. And just to run after tigers and wildlife parks I think we'll have to move away from that. One or two areas of concern, which I may perhaps be wrong, but it had come to my attention that some constructions were coming up in buffer zone. Now, honestly speaking, I do not have actual data, but it's something that has come to me. And I thought if it is true, then we need to really, really do something about it very fast. The second thing that I want to raise a red flag on is we need to have construction guidelines around parks. I think a lot of our small towns and villages around designated parks are very quickly becoming, high construction zones with multi-stories coming up. I think that needs to be curtailed. The third thing that I needed to red flag is the fact that a lot of these destinations are being used for incentive meetings and conferences and weddings, which is all right. I think if the environment is good, there is no harm in getting married there. There is no harm in having a conference there. But the thing to do is to prevent complete noise pollution. And I think that is an area which to my mind, needs to be looked at. Having said this, I'm not an expert in this, but as a citizen, as a concerned citizen, I think these are some of the points. With this, I'd like to thank Mandy for putting together this fabulous webinar. I'd like to thank Shoba for managing it so well. And incidentally, I'd like to thank the entire audience for participating. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not the first, this is not the second webinar. We are now coming out with a series of webinars on different topics and subjects, spearheaded by our very own Shoba Mohan. So thank you very much, and over to you, Shoba.
Yeah, thank you. It's just to quickly sum up and round this to say it was very, very interesting discussion. And of course, there are a lot of other things to be many more things to be discussed. But the good news is there are going to be a lot more sessions. Stay tuned in. RTSOI is ready for membership. You can write to Anjuna Dheer, who's here, and it would be a pleasure to host. Any questions that we've left unanswered will be answered by emails, and we will send them all back to you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Pabla. Thank you, Mr. Krishnamurthy. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you, Ravi ji. Thank you, Ali and Varun. Thank you for your time on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much.